today is Dagmar. And Dagmar, we are very happy to have you here today. And she's a member of the AAG board and heads two companies, Kleemann TTC and Realisira GmbH. Her specialties are the transactional analysis, coaching, and organizational development. And personally, she's quite passionate about nature and gardening, and she will share some insights with us today about gardening. And Dagmar, the digital stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Give me a second to share my screen and start the presentation. Okay. Wait, this is not how it's supposed to be. Okay, try that again. So, can you see? Wait
yes,
a minute.
yes, but not in the full screen mode.
No, that's my problem. I can see it at full screen, but you can't, and I have no idea why. We try it again.
Just in case, I have your backup if you would like to.
Yeah, wait a second. Do you see it in full screen now?
Perfect.
So that's the first slide. You can see that one. Yes, great. Now technical stuff is working. Thank you, Steffi, for the introduction. So I don't really need to say something about my companies anymore. The only thing that is still important for climate action, as well as me as personally, is that I also combine my further educations with my gardening, and especially everything that my clients get can eat during my further educations in my office building. They get out of my garden. So they always have a small experience from my garden as well. And in the next year, or in this year, if everything works well, we can also give the first sessions in the garden. The picture you're seeing here right now is from the second year in 2016 from my garden. That already looks like, oh my God, something is happening, because you will see the first pictures of this garden when I started my journey in gardening and started the things for me to say, okay, I don't want to talk about climate action all the time. I want to do something, because I'm a maker. I always need to do something and say, like, okay, what is actually the things that I can contribute to something? And being a role model is for me very important. And this is also one of the small accomplishments in that area of gardening already. I already got friends to start their own garden, because they saw what kind of passion I got in there and what benefits I got out of my gardening. And they're like, okay, I would like to have that too. And I really enjoy that. So then we can start. For the beginning, things that I don't want to do, or digital roles, I'm not giving you advice, because everyone who tries to do something in climate action, wait, it jumped out. Can you still see my PowerPoint presentation?
No.
And wait, I got kicked out totally out of the presentation. Wait. We do that again. So, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I don't want to give you advice, because you need to try and to fail on your own, which is absolutely okay. And you will fail a lot in gardening, and maybe even in climate actions. And this is also good, because by try and error, you find the perfect solution for yourself, and every person is different. I'm not saying that everything should be done like I did it, or everything is right what I do. I tried my best for myself. And what I also wanted to show you is how my garden will not look like to you. And this is especially these little pictures. It's not that I will have everything you see in straight lines, like you may be thinking out of a German garden, like everything is in one line, and there's a salad, and there's a rhubarb, and there's this. This is not how I work my garden. I also don't have huge places around there with stone areas where you can have a lot of heat collecting in the summer, especially with the last 2 summers of extreme drought we are having in Eastern Germany. And it also is not a place where you see a lot of lawn, even though you saw the first picture and I was like, oh yeah, it's green, there's a lot of lawn. This is not how it looks like today anymore. And in that picture, I also wanted to point out these solar collectors and the solar things that we tend to put in our garden and have it on throughout the whole night. And the most people who use these things don't even know that they are actually light pollution for all the insects and all the things that produce our food, because they're pollinating every little flower. And if they are not like in the mating season, can mate because they see light and they just fly into the light, there are no insects. There's no food left for us if we don't have insects. And this was one of the first things I learned in my garden, because I don't have things like that in my garden, but my neighbors do have that. And I talked about it with them and they were like, I didn't even know that. I just bought it because you can see that on advertisement all the time and everyone has it in the garden. And that was the first point when I realized a lot of people do have a garden and they have potential and they can create habitats for all the animals that were there before the garden was there, that maybe will there be after the garden will be disappearing. But they don't even know that. They make it out of misknowledge. They just see advertisement and think like, this is what I need to have. The same as with all these small little insect hotels you're seeing. It's actually not providing shelter or somehow a living area for insects, because it's far too small. I will show you some things of my garden so you can see the usual scale you need to have actually great habitats for animals. And like I said, I saw these things and thought like, okay, so it's the lack of education. So you need to educate people around in your garden and also your friends and everyone that they actually know that. For example, another thing would be hedges. In Germany, we love to have our hedges like squares. And you think like, wow, Darth Vader just went through the garden. Everything is a fucking line. And you think like, this is not normal. Nature is not looking like that. And I talked to my neighbor and he was like, did you see my hedge? I cut my hedge. This is so amazing. And I'm like, yeah. And meanwhile, you killed off a feeding area for so many insects. And he was like, why? I just cut my hedge. He wasn't even aware of the fact that this hedge, the type of liguster, is flowering in July and creates a lot of food for animals. And he was like, oh, I should have raided. And I'm like, yes, you should have raided. So end of July, you can cut your hedge because the flowering season is over and then it's no problem to cut the hedge. And so from one garden to another garden, I teach people what should you do and what should you maybe not do in order to create habitats for animals and have more animals in your garden. Because they, of course, see like later or earlier on in our garden experience, like 20 or 30 years ago, they had more animals in the garden. And they were like, it's so sad that they're disappearing. And then they come into my garden and say like, why are all the animals in your gardens? Like, because they can live in peace here. This is my fun answer that I always say. It's like, I leave them be and I don't use any kind of chemicals or cut everything back all the time. I'm not cutting grass once a week, but people do that. And of course, no animal will live there because it's too much noise, it's too much movement. They can't really live in peace. And like we humans, we want to live in peace. Insects and all other animals want to do that too. So now to a small agenda. I just want to get a kickstart into why am I gardening, what I'm up to, what is a permaculture, and what is climate action, and what you can actually also do and contribute on your own. So for the first thing, I'm a sucker for nature. I always was. My childhood was basically all the time outdoors. I grew up in a small village and I tried to live for 1 year in a city, wasn't capable to do that, was super annoying to me. So I moved out of the city again. And like 6 years ago, I thought like, this is the perfect time. I get myself a garden, a small, nice oasis. Now it has 520 square meters, which is amazing. You will see a lot of other pictures later on. And I really love to grow my own food and create my own stuff and share vegetables with other people around me and friends and everything. And of course, I also, due to the work that I'm doing, I'm working in psychology. I work with people all the time. I need to have time on my own and really scale back and recharge my batteries. And there's no place else on earth than my garden to do that. So that's why I really love doing that. And everything that is handicraft, I love to do that. Really just working and shut off my brain and just using my hands, and then I'm at my happy place. This is how it's been. So gardening is perfect for that. And you can help other animals and other people while having your garden, because I also give it to other people out of my friendship cycle and say like, okay, I'm not going to be there at the weekend because I have a further education. Would you like to join into my garden and just enjoy being there? And it really gives them fun and peace. So why not? Sharing is caring. So the next one, okay, now we start with a little bit of why gardening and what you need to take care of in order to actually start something and create a garden with climate action goals. And I started with a very, very pretty version of having not anything done in that garden for at least 6 years when I started to rent that garden. So the first picture, this is my pond, the first picture I ever took of my pond. And you think like, oh, that's a pond? Really? So there's so much stuff in there, so much green stuff. The lily, which is in the center, can't even grow properly. What was around there, I had no idea if it was just grass or anything else. That is the small picture. And what you need to do in gardening and also in climate action, you need to see the big picture. You can't just see one thing. And this is the point of view when you stand beside the pond and look into the garden. So I had a shed in the beginning that looked like that. And you see, there's nothing growing except grass. There's nothing. So how should animals feed on anything when you just have grass? They need to have flowers. They need to have areas where they actually can enter the water as well. So cleaning up the pond was extremely important to get everything out there and to also create areas where animals can actually live and feed. So this is behind the shed. And this is also, you see something empty, but what I see is a lot of potential. A friend of mine, he was visiting me in the first months of my gardening experience. And he would just stand there and thought like, I have no idea why you're doing that. The only thing I see is work. And I'm really glad that you can see potential. I have no idea how this is going to end up being good. And I was like, so that is one of my strengths. I always see potential in things and think like, so what can I build? What can I do? And what do I need in order to do that? And so that's when my journey started. This is what we found in the end when we started to actually work. There was a path. You couldn't even see that. I didn't thought that there would be a path. So there's even potential underneath whatever was growing there. And that was my first like treasure hunt. It's like, oh my God, I can clear that up and there's a path. And then I have a field and then I can work on that field and can grow my own food. So even though it still looks awful in that stage, but that's okay, you know, because you're working steadily on creating something new. And this is the inside of the shed, because we needed to rip everything out. I did a lot of that work with my friends. And it also helped me to see, okay, where do I get material to build something new? Craigslist, eBay, everything you can use. I did, and I learned to lay flags because a friend of mine, he showed me how to lay flags. And these are scrap flags. Someone was throwing them away, and the other ones with the other color, I just got for 35 bucks on Craigslist. And I thought like, okay, this is going to be the challenge. How do you get material that you don't need to pay money for or not much money for, and you can build something beautiful? So I started that, and it ended up by sharing and really thinking about, okay, I want to bring that message out to my friends and into the world. I talked to everyone about that. I shared my pictures, and then at the end, everyone was coming to me. It's like, you know, we're about to throwing that away. Do you need that for your garden? And it's unbelievable how much things people gave me. It was like, before we throw it away, you can have it. If it is scrap wood, if it's pellets, if it's like tiles or flags like that, or something for my kitchen, that was really amazing to me. And it's also an implementation of sharing and not throwing stuff away. You're reusing stuff and somebody else creates new value out of that. So you're not trashing things, which is also good climate action. So this is a picture how my garden looks now. It's full of abundance. You have a lot of different plants here, from squash to certain flowers, rhubarb, currant, blueberries, blackberries, zucchini, all kind of kale, and stuff like cauliflower. And I have different patches in different areas, and I work my garden as a permaculture. So this is the picture from the pond into the garden. When you remember the picture we saw earlier, I just go back. This is the exact same view. 3 years later, it looks like that. And this is also what you need to remember for climate action. We can't do things from one day to another. We need to have time, so we need to start acting now. Like a saying in Germany, the wisest thing to do is to plant a tree now, to actually have something from that tree in 10 till 20 years. If it's shade, if it's a nice climate, because every tree creates a microclimate, or if it's fruit from the tree. And you need to start acting now. And for me, this is always a picture that I love, because you see all the flowers, all the movement in there, and the possibilities you can have from a landscape that looked so extremely different beforehand. And that's what gardening and climate action for me is about. It's about sharing. I invite all the people into my garden. We're having barbecues. We exchange knowledge about gardening, what to do next, what kind of plants you actually can plant and what to do. This is really nice. I really, really love that. And so I know it's a ripple effect. If you're passionate about the things you're doing, you will infect other people with that, and they will start doing the same things, or things that are some kind like the things you're doing. And this is really amazing, and that is fun to me. And I'm so proud of all the friends who already got a garden, or saying like, okay, I started to have a patch in the garden of my parents, because I'm too scared to have a garden on my own, because I see it's a lot of work and I need to put in some effort. So that is really nice. And now I would like to switch to the tiny things of what is actually a permaculture. And for climate action, it's something very, very important, because it's an holistic system. And everything needs to work in a balance. You don't have like agriculture, what we see out on the fields all the time. And especially in dry seasons like we have right now, this is hard. If you have a permaculture, you need to schedule around 6 to 7 years to really establish a permaculture where everything, all the insects, all the things that work together are in balance. So I'm at my 6th year in my garden right now, so I'm getting to that balance right away. The first thing you need is soil. I didn't have really good soil in my garden, so I built up soil. And that was the first thing is you need to have worms, a lot of worms. So whenever I collected some worms from some other situations, and I started to build raised beds with old scrap pellets, and everything that I cut down in my garden, I put in there. And it takes around 3 years to create new soil. And with these, I started my own raised beds to actually plant all the plants that I'm having right now. Because in the ground, you couldn't plant anything. There was no nutrients, no nothing, because nobody took care of that region, and nobody really did anything. They most of the time cut down grass, and they take out the grass. So no nutrients get into the ground, and you can't really plant something on that. The second thing you need is food. You see a lot of food that I'm producing in my garden here, but next to the food that you're eating at the end, you need food for all the animals. So you need to have a lot of flowers. And what I also teach all the people that come to my garden, or if they get something out of my garden, it's like every single little fruit you see here has once been a flower, and it's once been a food for an insect to actually feed on, and then it produces food for us. So that is amazing, and that's a great cycle. The next thing you need is water. Water is something that is extremely scarce in Eastern Germany right now. So the first thing I did, I got myself barrels to actually collect rainwater, and then interacted with every single barrel, and at the end also had an overflowing barrel to have, if there is enough water, actually feed the pond as well. So there's a circle that water is not going to waste at all. And you have to have water places throughout the garden. I have one pond, but I also create other water and drinking areas for birds, for insects, for the snakes that I'm having, for the sand lizards that I'm having, because when they know, okay, they get water there, and they also get fresh water all the time, they of course always come back to my garden because they feel comfortable there. And then climate, this is something we hopefully can do more in the future for, that we know we are a part of that planet and we have to act on climate, because even though we know it's changing in cycles all the time, if you see it geologically, still we are doing a lot of mess on this earth to really progress and fasten that cycle, and we shouldn't do that. And energy is always coming in if you don't take stuff out of the garden. So if you produce your own soil and everything and compost everything, you will get bring back energy to your garden. And one thing I already mentioned is shelter. Shelter is very important. So building shelter, like for small little animals in my pond, that they have oxygen in the pond, as well as the part of having hedges that are not cut down so birds can nest in your hedge, or building a huge insect hotel out of old pellets and all of scrap material from my garden, branches, clay, and everything else. So actually, animals can live here. They actually love to live here even more, because this is an old trunk of a willow tree, and in a storm it broke down because it was too dry. So we cut everything away and got another fruit trees and just put them around that, and then put some stones around that and planted so many plants that animals love to be there. Sandlers always crawl around there. My little snakes, I love that. I have little sweet snakes in my garden, and it's just a heavenly place for me. And I know if everyone would take care of the garden in a permacultural way, more animals would feel comfortable living in our surrounding and not cutting everything down so they don't have the access or the areas or the shelter to actually live in. So that would be a permaculture. And in the middle, you see ethics. Of course, you need ethics. If you think that is your garden and you're the only person who can live in there, you and your family, then it's not really ethical. The animals have been there before we have been there. We are just using that space right now, and we should be respectful to the area and also to the soil and everything else. So that's why I really love the concept of permaculture. Exactly. So, and what could you do? Of course, some people say like, okay, I can't do anything because I'm just one human being. Yes, but you interact with a lot of human beings, so you can always be a role model. What I always tell people and teach them is to buy food locally, which is actually easy if you start to research it and say, okay, what is local food for me? What is seasonal food? I don't need to eat every single fruit every year round, because you get used to that stuff. And if you have a garden, you really relearn what is seasonal food and when do you really could eat something. And out of my experience over the past 4 years, the nice thing is you're not hungry to eat some kind of food that is not seasonal to you, because you already had at least 4 weeks of eating that stuff, because when it's growing in your food, it's growing a lot. And then of course you eat it and then you say, okay, now I can wait a year and then I have fun eating it again. So that is pretty amazing. And of course, you can always reduce the stuff that you need. You can reuse it. For me, the best example is if I buy stuff that I eat on my bread or anything else, I buy it in cans, in glasses. So I can wash that out, and then I have another thing to put something new for my garden in there and create a present for friends. Or I collect stuff and I just give that to other friends, because sometimes they say, I can't can the food that is left over that I bought in the store. I just throw it away. It's like, why can't you can it? Because I don't have cans. And I always say like, okay, just follow me. I have just one little space in my flat where I just have cans like that. It's like, how many want you to take with you today? So actually encourage people to do that. I collect for them and say like, yeah, I can give you 4, I can give you 5, and then you can just can that food. They need to try stuff out. And if you provide for that, they are more willing to try things out. You can always start on your window board. You don't need to start with a real huge garden. So if you have a tomato seed or anything else, just try it on your window board. Be a co-gardener. If you don't start with your own garden, that's absolutely fine. Try to find a friend that has a garden and say like, would you like to have some help? So you actually know what work needs to be done throughout the year. And with that, I can just say, get your hands dirty, see the big picture. Everything has potential. Just go for it, try it out, empower others. and enjoy your garden experience and your climate action while doing that. Thank you very much. With all the things you're seeing here, you can start stuff like I did with huge piles of trash, make something great out of it, create new habitats, and I hope to see you all someday in my garden.
Dagmar, thank you very, very much for sharing your experience with us and the insights from your beautiful garden.